The following program is a presentation of BaseNet Internet Television, bringing you topics in the way mainstream media won't. BaseNet Internet Television presents As We See It with Fred Boaz and friends. In Los Angeles, I'm Gene White. And now, to our studios in Boston.
Thank you, Gene, and hello, everybody, and welcome to show number 21 of As We See It, being recorded on Sunday, December 11th, 2011. As We See It turns 21 today, as Fred said last week. I'm Ed Jupin in Boston, in the Boston studios of BaseNet Internet Television. In Swiftwater, Pennsylvania, we have Fred Boaz. Out in St. Louis, Missouri, or at least I think she's in St. Louis, Missouri today.
Yes.
Holly Hurley. And joining us later on in the program for Holly and the Lobster Tales, we will have Larry the Lobster Marks from Brookline, Massachusetts. Holly and Larry, or Holly and Fred, good afternoon, good evening, welcome. How's it?
Well, good afternoon. We have a lot of news this week, Fred. This is a big week.
Really?
There's a lot of interesting stuff that came up this week, and the first one I'll start the show off with is that to thwart pornography, colleges are buying up a new domain called .XXX or .xxx sites, and this story comes out of St. Paul, Minnesota, that the University of Kansas, believe it or not, and it's paper, like I said, is out of St. Paul, but the University of Kansas is buying up website names such as www.kugirls.xxx and kunurses.xxx, but not because it's planning hot babes with Kansas, but because it wants to secure the site addresses to save their name. It said the university and countless other schools and businesses are rushing to prevent their good names from falling into the hands of the pornography industry.
Sure, it's just like us. If we could grab any form of basenet.xxx, it would be beneficial to us. Not that necessarily some porn company is going to start a porn site called basenet.xxx, but
you never know,
but no, you never know. And yeah, that's your point. That's why they're sucking these things up.
And the thing is just that the brand new XXX suffix is an adults-only variation on .com. The .xxx name went on sale to the public for the first time this week, promoting as a way to enable porn sites to distinguish themselves and a means of making it easier for internet filters to screen out things that parents and, of course, businesses don't want people to see.
Well,
ICM Registry of Palm Beach, Florida, the exclusive manager of the .xxx websites, and sells them to a dozen middlemen companies such as GoDaddy.com for an average of about $100 a year. You know, personally, I like the idea of the domain, the .xxx domain itself. I like the idea behind that. What I don't like the idea is that anybody can grab any name and have a .xxx at the end. There should be restrictions on that.
Well, I think you've actually got the gist of this entire situation, Fred, because the XXX domain is, there was a joke on one of the shows, but I think it really hit the nail on the head, which it said now porno has a domain instead of just being the whole internet, which, the whole internet was never.
Yeah, we were down, I should say, I'll give a little plug for our holiday special. Our 4th annual holiday special will be airing around New Year's. Myself and Larry the Lobster went down to New York City so that he could join Fred in our New York City segment of that.
Or was it me joining him?
And on yeah, either or. And on the way down to New York, we were discussing this, and I had said that now you go to hotgirls.com. Well, we kind of could already infer what hotgirls.com might be. Now, if it's hotgirls.xxx, there's no doubt as to what hotgirls.xxx more than likely is. But I agree with you, Fred. This new XXX domain doesn't stop Hot Girls, and my apologies to hotgirls.com if it's a totally legit website. Hotgirls.com isn't going to be taken down now just because of this XXX domain. So it would have been nice, as you said, if there could have been some type of mandate to direct porn directly or mandate them to use the triple X.
See, my problem is that when my son one time went on, he was looking for BJ's Warehouse, the warehouse club, and he puts in BJ's.com. And
Sure, you know where he got. Yeah.
And that's and by going where you said with mandating the triple X, BJ's.XXX gives us what we're talking about. BJ's.com now gives us BJ's Warehouse.
Right.
Well, and I think that's sort of where it's going, you know, is it helps porno differentiate itself and make sure that the people who find it are the people who are looking for it, which whether or not that's a good thing for porno distributors is a topic for another show.
I think it would be in their best interest to do it, you know, that way people know where to go to look for that stuff.
But there's also a problem when you can get Pepsi.XXX, Target, which sites have already been bought, by the way, Target.XXX, Sears.XXX. I mean, you know, these are additional domains that are out there that these people can now use. Now, anybody who thinks that Sears is going to be out selling porno has got to be out.
No, and they're not going to use it. If, for instance, we were to grab, I'm just using BaseNet XXX as an example, we're never going to use it. It's to protect your identity, that's all.
But anybody who thinks that Sears would be selling porno on Sears.XXX has to be a moron.
No, they're not. It's probably, I'll tell you exactly what would happen if they haven't already. If Sears buys Sears.XXX, it's either just going to be a parking page saying this page is owned by, is being hosted by GoDaddy.com, for instance. Just be a parking site, or it's an automatic redirect to Sears' site.
But even if they didn't, if they you know, swimsuits.com and you have swimsuits.com, I mean, anybody thinks that Sears or Target or anybody, even if they didn't buy those sites, use Target.XXX. Nobody in their right mind is going to believe that Target, the company, is going to be a participant in this in the first place.
No, well, yes,
they're really not hurting their good name, but it's a good idea to protect yourself and be proactive.
Yes and no. Look at where BJ.com got your stepson.
Well, but you know, I think Fred's right, and that this is a very easy investment for a company to make in order to protect their brand equity. It's really inexpensive for them. I mean, for a large company like Target, not
just buy up all of the .net, .tv, .com, everything.
Exactly, and it just makes sure that nobody out there misuses their name, because then they have to further look into that, and then there might be legal fees or whatever. Whereas if you buy it up now, you squash that. Yep. You squash that if you buy it now. It's good. Now we have. Are we going to move on to our other triple X?
I think we have to move on to a lot here. We have a lot on the agenda.
It's a lot to cover.
True story. So in you know, adults only news this week, also the Lindsay Lohan upcoming Playboy spread was leaked to the internet. And, you know, this is something that different magazines and different musicians have come into in the past, where their material's been released before the actual album or before the actual magazine. But I do believe this is one of the first times on record this has happened to Playboy.
Yeah, but you know something, I have no doubt that Hugh Hefner was part of it. I'm telling you.
He was. I read that this afternoon, that Hefner released it early.
He released it early.
He released the magazine. He's releasing the magazine early because it leaked. He figured, why make people wait? If
okay. It was
yeah, but I'm sure. Come on. I mean, you know, they released something. I have no doubt, especially with Lindsay Lohan, that they knew something about this before it got released. I mean, in this industry, there's no way you can keep that secret.
Exactly, and I think this is the interesting question. You know, it's like it's becoming more difficult for companies. I mean, if somebody can get to a company like Playboy, which I suppose people who are into pornography somewhat respect, you know, I wouldn't know actually. You guys can tell me if you know people who are, but I would think this would be sort of the ultimate no company can protect itself any longer. You have to be super careful because the information on our computer is really free game for almost anyone if they're desperate to hack.
It's 6 pictures available on the internet, and it ain't that big. And then I took a look at it before the show this morning, and it isn't that big a deal. These pictures aren't that big a deal.
Well, I also feel like, I mean, Playboy's a little fantastical anyway. You know, they do a lot of airbrushing. They make all the girls look really nice comparatively. And I would think, as far as like revealing something we haven't already seen, say, of Lindsay Lohan, I wouldn't necessarily see.
Not much we haven't already seen, no.
On tabloids yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys had any more to say about that, but I just thought it was interesting that even pornography is being hacked now, which is something you can already get for free on a good portion of the internet. So I thought that was interesting.
There's a story that came out of Washington that the Supreme Court rejected Monday a plea from a tiny evangelical church in Bronx, New York, to overturn New York City's ban on religious worship service at the public schools. Now, before people freak out, it's when the schools are closed. What's been happening is that the justice left in place a federal appeals court ruling that upheld the city's policy, which allows prayer and religious instructions but draws a line at worship. Now, the schools are being rented out. Uh, they're rented out on days when the people are when the school themselves are closed, and it's not being done during school hours. And I mean, they're talking about separation of church and state, and I got issued with that because when a city that's failing in its financial dealings with the world has a chance to make some money on a Sunday afternoon renting a school out for, I mean, they rent, churches rent their buildings to schools. Why can't a school rent this building on a day when it's not being used as a school to a church?
I certainly have no problem
both
with it.
sides of the issue on that, but
I have no problem with it.
Well,
but some
especially
people
in
do.
New York
I mean,
City.
they've
I
been
mean,
holding Sunday services at PS15 since 2002.
well, and what I think is especially interesting about this, Fred, is my church when I lived in New York actually practiced out of a synagogue. They paid the synagogue because they weren't there on Sunday mornings. They
Right.
paid the synagogue, and it was a way for the synagogue to make money. I mean, on one hand, I feel like yes, you have to hold a very close precedent with what's allowed to happen in school during school hours when school children are there. But I also feel like, schools need a way to make money just like any other place, and space is such a premium in New York. Who's this hurting?
I mean, the church might have to. They're talking in the article that the church, the pastor of the church, that his church might have to rent a smaller space and hold two services. Now, the idea is this: that we understand about the church, separation of church and state is set through the Constitution. That was set up so we don't have a church-run state. But that had nothing to do with worshiping on Sundays at a school that's closed. So I got issues on both sides with this. And I think the Supreme Court went a little bit overboard in this one, but that's my personal opinion anyway.
Well, I think as long as, and I can see how the Supreme Court wouldn't want to set a dangerous precedent, but I can see as long as all kinds of religions or all kinds of people are allowed to take advantage of this rent agreement, that it really shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Providing the schools are closed.
Correct. Yes.
You're
definitely.
absolutely
Proviso in this.
Fred, you're absolutely correct though. The framers of this country just didn't want a Church of the United States as there is a Church of England. Period. People in this day and age are just reading a lot more into that. People this day and age are just reading a lot more into it.
And I mean, they didn't want a church-run state like we have in some of the Islamic countries where the church is the law. Or, I mean, for lesser extent, a church-run state, the Vatican is a church-run state, I mean, for lack of a better example. And they didn't want that. They did not want a national religion. They wanted the idea of a non-sectarian government allowing people to worship as they wanted to.
No, that's what I'm saying. You have to put yourself in their shoes. They were speaking of nothing more than a comparison, and even you're going off on a little bit more of a tangent than what they meant. They really didn't mean that. Simply coming from England and declaring their independence from England, they wanted complete freedom of religion. They didn't want another Church of England, so they didn't want a Church of the United States.
There you go.
Period. That's all it was.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, but I can understand how it's a slippery slope, If they allow this one thing, then people will say, well, what's the difference between that and this, and bring another legislation up. And, because I think that's what they're afraid of, but I don't know if this is necessarily really a danger in that way.
No, let them make their money.
Yeah, I agree. And, I mean,
That's how we see it.
Yeah, right? I mean, along the lines of legislation, here's one a little closer to home for you guys. Occupy Boston finally decided to get up and move this week.
Well, they didn't actually decide to get up and move. They were kind of moved.
I guess you have a little clip for it. Let's throw the clip in and then we'll pick it up.
The Occupy Boston movement has been peacefully evicted. Police moved in early Saturday morning to clear the demonstrators from Dewey Square.
This operation and this encampment is over for now.
46 people were arrested, including some who sat down and linked arms in a final show of defiance. The mayor of the city had given protesters until Friday to leave, and many obeyed that deadline. Police say those who were left were accommodating.
What we've seen here today shows the relationship we have with them, that where they didn't put up a fight. And so we'll continue to work with them anywhere they go. But for the most part, I got to say, this operation went very well.
Police and other crews are now removing the leftover tents and sleeping bags from the park. Protesters estimate that 100 to 150 activists lived in the Boston encampment, and it's not clear if they will try to regroup elsewhere.
I mean, part of the problem, you and I discussed this earlier, Ed, is that, here Mayor Menino finally told these people that they had to leave where they were at for sanitary reasons, and these guys now want to pick up and find another location. Now, I don't have a problem with that in and of itself, but how long is this going to go on? And how long do these people expect? I mean, they want this thing to go on forever, and I'm sure the people of Boston, people of New York, people of San Francisco not that they don't want this going on forever, but there gets a point where the point gets dragged out and it becomes old and people start saying, hey, you've had enough.
Well, I don't know that they're going to find someplace else here, specifically in Boston. What happened is we saw at the end of that, heard at the end of that clip, when they were finally evicted from Dewey Square right across from South Station. They were gone for the better part of a day, and last night about 5 p.m. they all congregated on the Boston Common, and they had a meeting on the Boston Common to decide their future. And I guess they're trying to come up with another location to plant themselves. I guess they realized at that point, it wasn't going to happen on Boston Common, even though there were a couple stragglers late last night that had to be evicted from there. They just simply had a meeting deciding where they were going to go next, and I guess that's up in the air right now, but apparently they are trying to find another place to settle.
Why don't they go home?
You know what my favorite part of that clip was, Ed, is that the police in Boston, I feel like the police across the rest of the country could really take a number from the way that this particular issue was handled there. He said wherever they move, we have done such a good job of making them understand that we're just doing our job and negotiating with them. I mean, Boston comparatively has been much less violent than
there's been virtually no violence. It's been very smooth, and I think that's one of the reasons why Mayor Menino is pretty much given it his support from day one. Matter of fact, in a soundbite from Menino way back when, 3 months ago, he said, as long as these people don't do anything disorderly and get out of hand, I don't care how long they stay. And that's where that I don't care how long they stay originally came from. And even now, they weren't evicted finally because of violence or anything. It was just that Fred said in the opening, the city of Boston finally just looked at it sanitary-wise, that this is just getting out of hand. People go home, take a shower or something, and then think about coming back. It got to the point where it was more for sanitary reasons.
Well, and whatever you think about Mayor Menino, the way he communicated that, he said, listen, it's in the interest of public safety, guys. We care about you. We care about the other citizens in Boston. Let's work together. Let's make this, let's not make this a dangerous thing. I like the way he reached out and he said, listen, our hand was forced by the fact that this isn't sanitary anymore.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I thought that was really, hats off. I don't know where they'll end up next. I don't know what will end up happening, but I like the fact that the police and the government in Boston have taken an attitude of, listen, we respect your right to protest, but we respect our right to be citizens, and they've struck a very difficult balance. We've talked about that balance on previous shows, and it's even gotten heated because we couldn't find the middle ground, and somehow they have.
And I'll stir the pot back up again now. Fred, you said that how long is this going to go on, and when are these people just going to give it up? I would like you to expand on that. Why should they? If they believe in something, we have discussed over the past few weeks people's right to protest and all. Why should they have to just pack it up and go home if they believe in something and want to protest?
I'm just saying, there comes a point at which the other citizens started getting a little angry with it. They want to know why something's not being done. I don't personally care what they do. They're not protesting outside my house, so I could care less. But the idea is that is that everybody talks about whose rights are. What about the rights of these people to protest is undeniable. But when do their rights become more important than the rights of the citizens of Boston to be able to access that park without having to deal with these people?
Well, I could see the steam coming out of his ears all the way from over here, so I just want to bring him in a little early to discuss this. Larry the Lobster, what do you think about this? I know you have some strong opinions.
They do have the right to protest as long as they stay off of private property. Like here at Winchester House, for example, in an email, you said that maybe they should set up camp here.
In front of your house, right?
And I say no, because this is private property, and if they tried to set up camp here, they'd be booted out.
So would you have them have a problem with them setting up, say, on Boston Common itself or something, which is a public park?
I wouldn't have a problem with them setting up camp there on the Boston Common.
Fred and Holly, how about you guys? What about a public
As long
park?
as you're not
like that?
obstructing pathways, I don't have a problem with it.
I don't know, guys. This has been going on long enough. I'm starting to feel like
You're like Fred, just pack up and go home already?
Yeah, I kind of am. I mean, originally I was really for it, but like everybody's tried to go to the table and really get real information. And I feel like at this point people are just sitting there to sit there. I'm starting to believe that maybe they don't have a grand, important purpose.
An agenda. Nothing's being accomplished.
I mean, if you don't have, I've always said, like, if my idea is not good enough, then fine, propose something better. Or if you want to tell the government to change what they're doing, you better suggest a better plan. You better
Right, if you have a better way of doing it, suggest it. But if you don't, you don't.
Get out of Boston Commons.
All right. Well, thanks, Larry. What's next, guys?
Well, not all protesters have no agenda and are flying around in the wind. Some actually are getting really great things done in the world, and for it are receiving a Nobel Peace Prize. And I think we have a clip on this.
The 3 women who won the Nobel Peace Prize arrived for the ceremony in Norway. Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, women's rights activist Lema Gabawi, and Yemeni campaigner Tawakkol Karman were all in attendance. The women received their official prizes.
I am particularly honored to be a successor to the several sons and one daughter of Africa who have stood on this stage. Chief Albert John Lutuli, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk, Kofi Annan, Anwar el-Sadat, Wangari Maathai, Mohammed el-Baradi, as well as Barack Obama, Martin Luther King Jr., and Ralph Bunche, Americans of African descent.
It's no time to rest until our world achieves wholeness and balance, where men and women are considered equal and free.
I accept this award on my behalf and on behalf of the Yemeni and Arab revolutionary youth who are leading today's peaceful struggle against tyranny and corruption with moral courage and wisdom.
Receiving the prize on the 115th anniversary of the death of benefactor Alfred Nobel will share a total award worth $1.5 million.
So essentially, these are 3 women who fought for justice and against dictatorship and sexual violence in Liberia and Yemen, and they are basically rising up against the male supremacy in that area. In case you don't know, that's an area that is very violent towards women. They are violently oppressive of women, and these 3 women basically found their voices and stood up against the government, and for that the rest of the world is granting them the Nobel Peace Prize. I think this is amazing. I think this is really beautiful.
And it'll something I'm sure you're going to be discussing on the show.
Oh, well, this will definitely be a topic for our upcoming show. You know, one of the things that we struggle with creating this show is you have women who are educated, who are creative, and who are also basically basically accomplished, who want to be heard fairly by both sides. And I think we struggled a little bit with creating the concept of the show because so many women's shows are talked about by men as sort of a joke. You know, even when you guys talk about it, you're like, oh, that cute little girl show, or oh, isn't this Twilight?
Yeah, even when I just refer to The View, you know, I think of women there from their 30s up to their, I guess, 80s, just sitting around drinking tea and talking about women issues. So yeah, I even say it jokingly.
Exactly, and it's interesting because you know people like Lisa Ling came out of the View, who has done unbelievable things to break through new journalism news from all over the world about injustices that are going on, and you know, and I think that these women are a really good example of sort of the kind of women we like to be, as well as the kind of women we'd like to have on the show, because it just proves that equality is not yet, we're not there yet as a world community. I mean, we're not there yet in America, though we are working towards it here. Most of the professionals I've talked to about this say that America is actually very ahead of the curve as far as having women CEOs and things like that, but we're still very behind as far as equality is concerned. And, you know, I think this is a wonderful recognition of the fact that this is not something we can stop fighting for yet, but that there is an appropriate way to go about it. And I think these women are, I mean, hopefully this $1.5 million will go to really changing the world. Hopefully, I mean, in Africa especially, that's a lot of money and a lot can be done.
It sure is.
I mean, the thing that gets me is we forget in this country that things are not equal here as they are all over the world. I mean, my mother will tell you that even though women got the right to vote in this country in the 1920s, it was almost until the 1970s when women in Switzerland and parts of Europe got the right to vote. So things have not always been equal all over the world, and there are still countries where women are treated like cattle, treated like property.
A lot of Middle Eastern countries.
A lot of it, and again that goes back to our talk before about about what I said about a state-run government where people come here expecting the equality or the lack of equality in their country to be accepted here. We just won't do it, and it creates problems. So a show like this one coming up is going to be fabulous for that.
Well, that's certainly my hope, I would say, and I think it's a beautiful thing that I think when you do something like award a Nobel Prize to women like these, basically, you know, you guys are talking about this with me now, and you know, it's like you said, I think a lot of men, especially in this country, like you said, you've talked to your mother about this now. You know, I think bringing that awareness to men and saying, because they say in this country, because we are so far ahead of other countries, that if you remind like a hiring male, there have been studies done that like if a resume comes in and the male or female actually, because females actually treat women differently in this country as well, are reminded that to act equally, that immediately the bias, the sexual bias disappears. So I think it's really interesting that basically all we need in this country is awareness, and something like this definitely raises awareness. And I think in a country like Germany or Norway, one of these countries where they're also working on a greater equality. I mean, you know, we already have a female president in Germany. You know, that this will, you know, increase that awareness for the countries that are already making headway, and hopefully draw attention to the ones who aren't and fix that problem.
You know, that's so funny you mentioned that. About 20 years ago, I was hired by a woman as her assistant, and one of the questions I asked her during the initial interview process was, why aren't you bringing on another woman? And she laughed and she said, the owner would never let me hire another woman. He's not going to have two women running his business.
Wow. Yeah, so I mean, you experienced that firsthand, even, and I love that you were smart enough then to ask the question and to know that that would be relevant.
Yeah, because actually she asked me, I'll never forget this initial conversation, and she had asked me, she said, do you have a problem working with or for a woman? And, you know, obviously I said, no, of course not. And that's when the conversation evolved into that. I said, well, then along those lines, you know, why aren't you hiring another woman to work with yourself? And that's when she said the owner would not have allowed that. He still wanted that male presence.
Well, and this is I think the balance that we're working on striking, around the world. It's, even one of the things I took a recent course on gender differences in negotiation, and what the professor was talking about is it's not actually just men who have difficulty judging women equally. It's actually a problem that women have as well. And as you said, if you bring it up, it erases the bias here, which is something I think is probably more unique to America than other countries. But if you say, remember, you need to treat this candidate equally, then they will. And it's really I mean, we could talk all day on that subject, but I think it's really neat that this is what the Nobel Prize was about. And I think lately the Nobel Prize has definitely seemed to take an eye on not only what they can do to award previous good behavior, if you will, but also they're awarding it to people in a way that will incite future growth.
Or let me fire Fred up. I'm sure this will. Or giving the Nobel Prize to people like Barack Obama.
Well, that doesn't fire me up. What bothers me about it, it was given before anything was done for what he said he was going to do, rather than what he actually did or didn't do.
Right.
And that bothers me because that. Why are we giving it out then? I mean, if you say you're going to do something,
accomplish something
do it,
first, yes.
then give you the prize for it. But just because you said you did something, you're going to do something. That's just giving away money.
I respect the opinion on that, but I have to tell you that one of the things that often gets swept under the rug is that in his first 4 months of presidency, Barack Obama was statistically actually the most accomplished president in office. He actually accomplished more in his first.
Oh yeah, he's done more in the first 4 months than he did in the next 3 years.
Well, I think that's true, but hold on, I'm not quite done. I think that's true, but I mean, statistically, he passed through more bills and laws and actually got more done in his first 4 months than any president in history. And so at the time that was awarded, he actually not only had overcome what has been for us a very uphill battle in this country as far as being an elected official of, as we've talked about before, any other descent other than Caucasian, or maybe only partially Caucasian. Hey, we'll take baby steps. But he also did accomplish more. I mean, at that point, all indicators were to, hey, not only do we award what you've already done, but we want to award what you're going to do in the future. Now, between then and now, that may be something up for discussion.
And you don't take the award back, obviously.
Oh, no, not at all. But what happens is that we got to remember the award takes at least 3 months before it's awarded, which means that if he was in office 4 months, it was awarded the first month, which again, it was awarded before the award was decided before the presidency became about. And that just bothers me. I would much rather have had him awarded the award for what has been accomplished or what he's done within the presidency after the fact rather than beforehand. But that's neither here. That's a whole.
No, I'll agree with that. Good, bad, or indifferent, whether he gets reelected next year or not, maybe at that point you give the award.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, let him run his term first.
Well, and speaking about running, and also an only less slightly controversial award, the Heisman Trophy went to Baylor, RG3 from Baylor, Robert Griffin III, and he beat out guys from Stanford, and I mean, this is cool, man. Go kid from Texas.
Can we get a woohoo?
Woohoo!
There you go.
So is he going to go to the St. Louis Cardinals or St. Louis Rams, or to this New England Patriots?
Yeah, I remember
I
those days.
believe he's what is he, a junior? I think he's still.
Yeah, I think he's a junior.
Yeah, he's a junior.
Yeah.
But man,
money talks. Look at how many players don't go to their senior year anymore.
That's a really good point, actually. I mean, listen, if you get drafted, by all means, go for it, because a career in sports is short. Play while you're healthy.
Education is still better.
What's that?
Finish your year up in college and go the next year.
That's right.
I would agree with that for any other career other than professional sports. Although I don't know if these guys are ready usually when they get into professional sports if they don't go to their last year of school. But I do feel that their careers are so short, the younger they could do it, the better off they are.
Money while you can.
Yeah, I know. I hate to say that because it's just, obviously it isn't the route I took, but it just seems dangerous.
Yeah, well, congratulations to him.
Yeah, there you go.
Congratulations on a Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, that's a good trophy to win.
Very prestigious award in sports.
Yeah. So now this is, the discussion that we had at business school was that Coke actually released their formula, their secret formula, for the first time in history.
Actually, though, they didn't, did they?
Well, actually, we have a clip. Let's listen to the clip and let's talk a little more about it.
After 86 years, the secret is out.
The secret formula for Coca-Cola is here.
We have moved the secret formula of Coke to the home of happiness, which is the world of Coke.
Out of the bank vault and into a vault at Coca-Cola's corporate museum in Atlanta.
To be part of a very special exhibition that we will have for the 1 million fans that visit with us here each calendar year.
The company celebrated the move, holding an event where they revealed the new exhibit that will house the secret formula. There has been much ado about the formula of Coke after Dr. John Pemberton invented it in 1886 and memorized the ingredients. In 1891, Asa Candler bought the rights for $2,300, and in 1919, the company was sold for $25 million.
It was not until 1919, when the Candler family sold the Coca-Cola Company, that it was first committed to paper. And it was considered to be such an important document that it was actually used as collateral for the sale.
The formula has helped snowball the Coca-Cola Company's value to roughly $150 billion. It still remains a secret. The closest people can get to it now is to see the vault where the company says it is housed.
So I think what she was saying is that basically we wouldn't understand, like they give you the formula, but it doesn't really make any sense unless you know what all the ingredients are, maybe?
Okay, well, in this clip, the clip that we just played, as you heard, they just talked about this museum that Coke has in Atlanta, and they put this new display with this new safe or whatever that the formula is locked up in, just so that when you go on the tour of this museum, now you can see the safe that the formula is locked up in. But no, I don't know that they're ever going to give out the formula. But then again, like what you just said, Holly, the formula doesn't necessarily need to be 2 teaspoons of that and 3 tablespoons of this. It could be a mathematical formula that, as you just said, we're not going to know what the heck it means anyway.
I think
people who will are people in the industry.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what she was saying, because there was a report a few years ago on NPR, This American Life. They replay it all the time because it was one of their favorites. That basically they'd found the original recipe and they took it to the guys who make Jones Soda and they had them mix it up, and it still tasted slightly different.
Yeah.
And they said they think what's changed over the years, of course, because of the concentrations of what they put in have changed actually since the original formula, is the percentage of each.
There you go. So even if you follow the formula, it's not going to taste the same.
Yeah,
because the formula evolved over years.
And I'm sure it's still changing as we speak. And they find new ingredients that help out,
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, putting aside the new Coke fiasco of the early '80s, even just and BaseNet has covered this a lot over the past 4 years. Just the high fructose corn syrup versus sugar concept and theory.
What about the old '70s things where with the fake sugar that was in there?
Yeah, sodas taste so much different with sugar as opposed to high fructose corn syrup.
You gotta love Jolt Cola, man.
Coke is still using high fructose corn syrup, as opposed to Pepsi, which at least in Pepsi Throwback now has sugar in it again. So yeah, again, even Coke is messing with the formula because the original formula was sugar, not high fructose corn syrup.
Well, and I think you guys are on to something too. I mean, a lot of the news is essentially that Coke is just, this is just another way to reawaken the PR behind the secret formula. It's like, are we really learning anything new from this? Probably not. There was a rumor years ago that someone sent the Coke formula to Pepsi, and Pepsi just sent it right back without opening it because they didn't care, because Pepsi has their own formula, and it just, Coke is Coke, and it's always going to be Coke, made the way Coke makes it. And I mean, are we really learning anything new from this? Probably not. Is it interesting? Yeah.
But I guess there's a nice new attraction at the museum down there at Atlanta anyway. So if you're a Coke fan, go to the museum.
Exactly. I think that's safe to say.
So I guess, Holly and Fred, if that just about wraps up our regular news segment, we could move on to, as we say, another exciting adventure of Holly and the Lobster Tales. Holly and Larry, take it away.
So what have you got for me this week, Larry?
Okay, well, the first one I have is while President Adams was running for re-election as president, he was defeated by his vice president, Thomas Jefferson.
Okay, here's the quiz, everybody. And where was President Adams from?
We discussed it in a couple of shows.
Yeah, Holly wins. Quincy.
There
Okay.
you go.
Go ahead, Larry. Sorry.
Not like we didn't discuss this a couple of shows ago.
Okay. Number 2 is I am is the shortest complete sentence in the English language.
You are what?
Well, go through your list and then we'll kick them around, I guess.
Okay. Number 3 is nutmeg is extremely poisonous when injected intravenously. Number 4, okay, the cruise liner QE2 moves 6 inches for every gallon of diesel fuel burned.
Holly, what do you think about any of these?
Okay, I just need to start with the nutmeg thing. Who does these things? This is like the vodka soap tampon. At what point do you go, oh, this tastes really good, maybe I'll...
Yeah, you wake up in the morning, oh, I'm going to shoot myself up with nutmeg.
Well, man, nutmeg.
What is going on? Why?
If I'm carrying nutmeg, do I get busted for controlled dangerous substance now?
I was saying off air, just to bring in our listeners, what me and these guys here were talking about before we started recording the show. Every time, it seems like every time I use either nutmeg or cinnamon, which are the same aromatic type product, whenever I go to sprinkle either one of those on something, I get into a sneezing fit because it's such a fine powder. It goes up my nose, and I'm sneezing for the next 10. And apparently, and I'm sneezing for the next 10 minutes. So if that happens, even if I just breathe this stuff in, I don't know that I'd want to inject myself.
Well, you smoke
and taking it a step further, I mean, was somebody trying to snort it, and because they kept sneezing and they couldn't snort it, they went, oh, I'll just...
Oh, I got an easier way to do this.
Hey, well, man, put it in some cigarette papers. You make a nutmeg joint out of it, man.
And going back to number 1, John Adams being defeated by Thomas Jefferson, we want to clarify that there's nothing in particularly significant about the vice president assuming the presidency, but John Adams was running for re-election, and a sitting president was defeated by a sitting vice president. And
right, for the election, right.
That is probably the only time in history that that's ever happened. What were your other 2, Larry?
I am is the shortest complete sentence in the English language.
It is?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I guess I am is shorter than it is, right?
Yes, indeed, by one whole letter.
Yes, it is.
And the last one is the cruise liner QE2 moves 6 inches for every gallon of diesel fuel burned.
Now there's some fuel economy
That's,
can't feed.
You know, that's an amazing fact. I mean, I like that lobster tail. Everybody could get a visual image of how far 6 inches is, and to move that measly 6 inches, it took a gallon of fuel.
Yeah.
God.
Look at the size of it.
Sure. Well, I don't care. I don't care how big or how small it is. It's what just gets me. This is just me personally. It's not so much the size; it's the equation. 6 inches equals 1 gallon of fuel.
Yeah, but I got a problem with that because a company called CSX talks about they're able to move a diesel train or a locomotive is able to move a train 400 miles in a gallon of fuel.
Yeah, so how's the QE2?
Well, how's the QE2 not? And they talk about that on television all the time. And how is they can only move the Q? And we know it's because of the difference of water and friction. I understand that. But if they can do it with one, why not be able to do it with the other?
I think they're probably, there's got to be some functionality that it can do that nothing else can do. And they're just waiting on something more efficient to take it over.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Well, you know what? I think we found out what killed the cruise industry 40 years ago when the cruise industry initially died.
Yeah, that's a hot mess. I mean, I don't know. That's, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that puts the wraps on another exciting adventure of Holly and the Lobster Tales. Thank you, Larry and Holly. And Fred, what do we have for obits this week? And then we'll wrap up the show.
Well, Harry Morgan, formerly who played Colonel Potter on MASH, died Wednesday at age 96. He played that. He played Officer Bill Gannon on Dragnet. His son Charles confirmed his death, that he had been treated for pneumonia recently. And his son Charles, who's a lawyer, said in a telephone interview that he would marvel at his father's photographic memory. He said, "My dad would read a script all the way. Somebody else would read it, like somebody would read Time magazine and put it down and be on the set the next day." He was never a guest on a talk show. Charles Morgan said it did not seem appropriate, necessary, appearing at a talk show to focus on himself because he was Harry Morgan. He said was not nearly as natural as appearing in a role as Pete Porter or Bill Gannon or Colonel Potter or as the cowboy drifter who wandered into town with Henry Fonda and got wrapped up in the vigilante brigade in the Oxbow incident. Anyway, we do have a clip, and we're going to sign off with this clip. So we hope you enjoy yourselves. And Harry, we wish you all the best. They're up in him and Jack are up in heaven solving all the crimes up there. And here's the clip, and have a nice evening.
And the MASH theme is courtesy of 20th Century Fox. Suicide is painless.
Character actor Harry Morgan has died. He was best known for playing Colonel Potter on MASH. During his decades in show business, he appeared in 10 TV series, 50 films, and on Broadway. But it is as the fatherly Colonel Sherman Potter that the world will likely remember him. He was on MASH for 8 of the show's 11 seasons, one of TV's most successful runs in primetime. His daughter-in-law tells the AP he died at his home in Brentwood after having pneumonia. Harry Morgan was 96 years old.